marijuana resolution that passed last night. I did do press last night on this. I'll make a few opening comments, but I really am going to let this be question driven since I kind of put it out there last night already. But as has been widely reported, the City Council did pass resolution item number 59 last night, and there's a couple key points to identify out of that. First and foremost, marijuana was not decriminalized. That is an action that can only be taken by the state legislature and not be done through direction of a city council. They cannot change state law. It was not decriminalized. It is still illegal, and the Austin Police Department will still enforce marijuana law. If we come across people in the community that are smoking marijuana or in possession of marijuana, we will take enforcement action. We have taken many steps in this community to implement practices and policies that are reflective of minimizing the impact of low-level violence, but we also enforce the law when we come across it. So at this point, nothing will change. Officers that come across someone smoking marijuana or in possession of marijuana, we will handle it as we have, and that is either through cite and release, if the person is eligible for cite and release and the violation is eligible, or if it's if the appropriate response is the arrest, then that will be made. We will continue to evaluate the resolution that was passed, and I would remind everyone that the resolution has the city manager going back to mayor and council by May with any recommended changes to APD's policies and practices. So we will take a look at our policies and practices, but at this point, the direction that has been given to the officers is that we have not changed our enforcement protocols today as they were yesterday and the week before, but we will be looking at the resolution to determine if there's anything that we should be doing differently based on the actions that City Council took last night.
I mean, at the end of the day, can City Council tell police what they can and can't enforce?
This was a direct question that came out on social media. I think all of you retweeted it, and so to directly answer the question, no, a city council does not have the authority to tell a police department not to enforce a state law. Now, we are always trying to work with our community, and we're trying to ensure that our practices align with community expectations, and this goes back to steps we've already taken as a city, implementing policies that we believe are reasonable. If we look at how we've approached many things in the city of Austin, looking back a year or so, the juvenile curfew, we agreed that maybe the juvenile curfew wasn't necessary anymore and that we could still maintain the public safety without a juvenile curfew. So we did that. We looked at our enforcement of some laws that definitely had disparate outcomes, such as driving while licensed invalid, and could we handle that outside of making that custody arrest? All of these things, increasing the use of cite and release, increasing the violations for which cite and release can be used. We are a progressive police department. We are often held out amongst our peer agencies as one of the agencies that is more progressive than others, and we will always look to make sure that we are employing best practices, practices that we think meet the community standards, but at the end of the day, as a police department, we are charged with keeping the community safe, and that comes with enforcing the law.
Chief, how does that affect DPS that are coming to assist? Are they going to follow the directives that the city officers are doing, or are they going to do their thing, and how does that give and take work?
DPS, again, will be operating under their own guidelines. They have their own policy manuals, and obviously they're enforcing the same state laws that we're enforcing. That being said, we have a very strong working relationship with DPS. They have been in our community many times. They have come and helped us with the large music festivals that have occurred in years past. They were here side by side with us through the bombings, and we have always worked positively with them. And that's what the meetings next week will be, is kind of delineating the areas of responsibility that we would like DPS to assist us with, and them letting us know what they can help with. And although they will not necessarily be enforcing city ordinances, we do expect that they'll be supporting us, again, in both the visible presence, but also in enforcing any laws that will help keep the city safe and address what we're seeing as a growing crime trend, especially in the downtown area.
What steps have the department taken between the state hemp law going into effect and this resolution to move toward THC concentration testing or enhance that capability?
We were working in our lab to develop the protocols to test marijuana so that we could determine the quantification of THC. I think it's been widely reported that with the legislation that legalized hemp, we now have to be able to prove that a substance is above 1/3 of 1% THC for it to qualify as cannabis instead of hemp. We were working in our lab, our folks were putting together protocols so that we could perform that testing here, and we were also looking to acquire instrumentation that would allow for those calculations as well. With the actions that were taken by City Council last night, those operations will cease. We will no longer have people in our lab working to come up with a methodology that will allow us to test for the quantification of THC, and we will now await the work that's being done in other labs to see if they can put together a protocol that we would then look to implement in our lab.
So that equipment was not purchased?
That particular piece of equipment actually is a redundant piece of equipment. It wasn't being purchased to test marijuana. It can test for many different substances. Marijuana was just one of them. So that was not the purpose behind purchasing that piece of equipment.
Can
But you already
not
have one.
purchase it now?
You already have one of those, correct? It is capable of all that as well, just the protocols weren't in place?
Correct. We already have the machine, and if we were to need another machine or need a backup machine, then it was for something beyond just marijuana testing. So we would have a legitimate need for testing other drugs and other substances.
Can you still purchase that piece of equipment? Because you still, I assume if that machine goes down, you're gonna have trouble testing all the other substances that come in.
I'll have to see if that actual purchase went through, but again, we already had one of those. That was to increase capacity and also to build in redundancy. Thank you.
Thank you. So now that you all have this machinery to